It's a Spotify podcast.
You pushed me down, thought I'd stay on the ground, counting me.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rabbit Holes Deep Dive. I almost forgot what I was doing. Tonight we're talking about the Freemasons, the rituals, basically all the rituals that they do, and just dive right into it. So, what is still a secret about the Freemasons? A door closes, a lock turns. Inside the room, men stand beneath symbols that have existed for centuries. A square, a compass, two pillars, an unfinished stone, an open sacred book, and an eye watching from above. For generations, people have asked the same question. What happens behind that door? But here is the strange part. We already know the ceremonies have been published, the passwords have been printed, the handshakes have been described, the oaths have been exposed, the symbols have been photographed, analyzed, copied, debated, and placed all over the internet. So why does the mystery remain? If the rituals were so secret, and the rituals are now public, then what is still being hidden? Maybe the most important secret was never the handshake. Maybe it was what happened after two powerful men recognized each other. This is Rabbit Holes Deep Dive. And today we are going inside the most famous and the most misunderstood private organizations in human history. The Freemasons, not to prove that they control the world, not to dismiss every concern as paranoia, and not to replace one mythology with another. We read the books, we study the records, we compare the competing explanations. Our goal is not to tell you what to think. Our goal is to help you think more clearly. Because somewhere between the harmless fraternity and all the powerful secret government is a much more interesting story. A story about a ritual, trust, identity, influence, and the invisible architecture of human relationships. The rituals were exposed. So what is still a secret? Everyone already knows when the most powerful people imagine Freemasonry, they picture a secret society. Men meeting at night, strange clothing, locked rooms, whispered passwords, ceremonies inherited from some forgotten ancient world. That image is not entirely wrong, but it is incomplete. Freemasonry does have private ceremonies. It does use symbolic language. It does preserve signs, words, and methods of recognition. And members traditionally promise not to reveal certain parts of what they have experienced. But Freemasonry is not an organization with one leader. There is no single worldwide Masonic president, no universal headquarters controlling every lodge, no supreme office from which every Mason receives instructions. Instead, Freemasonry is a decentralized network of jurisdictions. Different Grand Lodges govern different territories. Different traditions recognize or refuse to recognize one another. Different countries permit different beliefs, practices, and membership rules. Even the meaning of being a Mason can change depending on where you stand. In one town, the lodge may be a small charitable organization where older men share meals and raise money for scholarships. In another time and place, a lodge may bring together politicians, military officers, judges, merchants, and intellectuals. And in rare cases, a lodge-like network may become something far more dangerous. That distinction matters because whenever someone says the Freemasons did this, the first question should be, which Freemasons? Which lodge? Which jurisdiction? Which country? Which century? And what evidence connects the organization, not merely an individual member, to the event? Without those questions, investigation turns into mythology, but mythology did not appear from nowhere. Freemasonry was built to create mystery. The oldest secure history of organized modern Freemasonry leads us to Britain in the 17th and early 18th centuries. In 1717, 4 London lodges repeatedly came together and formed a Grand Lodge. That moment is often treated as the beginning of organized modern Freemasonry. But Freemasonry's symbolic identity reached backwards to medieval builders, stone cutters, cathedrals, castles, craft guilds, apprentices learning under masters, workers traveling from one construction site to another. In a world without identification cards, digital records, or professional databases, a skilled worker needed a way to prove what he knew. A sign, a word, a grip, a method of recognition. The tools of the builder became symbols of the human being. The square became morality. The level became equality. The plumb became upright conduct. The rough stone became the unfinished person. The polished stone became a character shaped through discipline. But then something changed. The lodges became admitting men who were not working: stonemasons, gentlemen, merchants, scientists, clergy, politicians, thinkers. The lodge slowly transformed from a place that built structures into a place that claimed to build people. This is where operative masonry became speculatory masonry. The physical temple became a metaphor. The tools became moral instruction, and the candidate became the material being shaped. But why use secrecy? Why not simply teach these lessons in public? Perhaps because information feels more valuable when it must be earned. Perhaps because a truth encountered through ritual feels more powerful than the same truth printed on a page. Or perhaps because secrecy was never just about protecting information. Imagine entering a room where everyone else understands the rules and you do not. Your ordinary clothing has been altered. Your vision may be restricted. You are guided by someone who already knows the path. You are asked questions. You are placed in a position of vulnerability. You are told what happens next as meaning. And before you receive the lesson, you must demonstrate trust. This is the psychological architecture of initiation. The precise ceremonies vary, but foundational craft Freemasonry is organized around 3 degrees: entered, apprenticed, and fellowcraft, and master, mason. The first degree presents the candidate as a beginner, unformed, uncertain, a person standing at the entrance to knowledge. The second degree expands the journey. It emphasizes learning, work, geometry, the liberal arts, the development of the intellect. The human being is no longer merely entering into structure. He is learning how the structure is built. Then comes the third degree, the master mason. And this is where the atmosphere changes. The central character is Hiram Abiff, a figure connected to Masonic tradition to the construction of King Solomon's temple. The Bible mentioned craftsmen named Hiram, But the detailed Masonic drama is not simply a biblical story. It is a later legend in the legend. Hiram possesses knowledge that others want. Men who have not earned the knowledge demand it from him. He refuses. He is attacked, killed, hidden, searched for, found, and symbolically raised. This is not a casual lesson about being a good neighbor. It is a drama about loyalty under pressure and protecting anti-trusted knowledge, about morality, and about betrayal, about what remains when the body fails, and about whether truth can be recovered after it has been lost. At the center of this drama is one of Freemasonry's most powerful ideas, the lost word. Depending upon the tradition and interpretation, the lost word may represent divine truth, perfect knowledge, the name of God, moral certainty, wisdom destroyed by corruption, or humanity's endless attempt to recover something it once possessed. Some people interpret it literally as a hidden divine name, a supernatural formula, a piece of ancient knowledge preserved through initiation. But no reliable evidence demonstrates that mainstream Freemasonry possesses a magical word capable of altering reality. The symbol is real. The supernatural claim is not established, and that distinction will become important again and again, because Freemasonry exists in the borderland between history and allegory, between institution and mythology, between the things members officially teach and the meanings later generations project onto them. But the Hiram drama does something psychologically important. It turns loyalty into experience. A person can read a sentence saying that loyalty matters, or he can enter a controlled symbolic environment, witness betrayal, confront death, and emerge as part of a brotherhood that claims to preserve what was almost destroyed. The lesson is no longer merely understood, it is remembered. This is how rituals shape identity. They separate life into two periods, separation. The person is removed from the ordinary life. Then comes transition. The person occupies an uncertain state between identities. Finally comes incorporation. The person returns with the new status. He is not simply a man who learned a password. He is now a member of a group that shares a protected experience. That may be the first genuinely important secret of Freemasonry. The ritual does not merely conceal information. It manufactures belonging, changes behavior. The invention of ancient history. Freemasonry surrounds itself with the imaginary of antiquity. Solomon's Temple, ancient builders, Egyptian mysteries, sacred geometry, Knights of Templar, lost wisdom, names, symbols, and stories that appear to reach backward through thousands of years. But how ancient is Freemasonry really? The answer depends upon what we mean. Its modern organization can be historically traced. Its symbols often come from much older sources. The answer depends upon what we mean. Its modern organization can be historically traced. Its symbols often come from much older sources, but symbolic inheritance is not the same as organizational continuity. Consider ancient Egypt. Egypt fascinated Europe for centuries. It represented age, mystery, like that. Consider ancient Egypt. Egypt fascinated Europe for centuries. It represented age, mystery, monumental architecture, secret priesthoods, the afterlife, hidden writing, knowledge preserved in stone. Later, Masonic and Masonic-inspired systems adopted Egyptian imagery. Some claim that Freemasonry descended from Egyptian mystery schools. But there is a problem. No continuous historical chain connects ancient Egyptian priesthoods to modern Masonic lodges. There are influences, borrowed symbols, philosophical parallels, later interpretations, but between ancient Egypt and modern Freemasonry lies an enormous documentary gap. The same problem appears with the Knights Templar. The medieval Templars were a real military religious order. They accumulated wealth and influence. They operated across borders. They developed an image of discipline, secrecy, and brotherhood. Then, in the early 14th century, the order was suppressed, its members were arrested, its property was seized, its leaders were prosecuted, and its dramatic destruction created a perfect legend. Later, Masonic bodies adopted Templar titles, costumes, and stories. The Masonic Knights Templar organizations exist today, but no reliable documentary chain proves that the medieval order secretly survived for centuries and transformed directly into Freemasonry. The connection is emotionally compelling, but historically unproven. Why, then, were these ancient lineages created? Because traditions gains authority from age. A new organization says, we created this. An ancient organization says, we inherited this. One sounds like an invention, the other sounds like a stewardship. And once an institution presents itself as a guardian of something ancient, members no longer feel that they joined a club. They feel that they are entering history. But the strange part is that invented traditions can still produce real consequences. A symbolic Templar lineage may not historically continue, yet it can inspire genuine loyalty. An Egyptian ritual may not descend from ancient priests, yet it can transform how participants. An Egyptian ritual may not descend from ancient priests, yet it can transform how participants understand themselves. Human beings do not respond only to facts. We respond to meaning. And sometimes a story becomes socially powerful long before it becomes historically true. The Illuminati enters the room. In 1776, in Bavaria, a professor named Adam Weishaupt founded an organization that would become one of the most famous secret societies in history, the Bavarian Illuminati. Unlike the imaginary organization of modern movies and internet theories, this Illuminati actually existed. It used secrecy, aliases, granted initiation, compartmentalized knowledge, recruitment among educated and influential people. And it sought to spread Enlightenment ideas while limiting the influence of religious and monarchical. Naomi, strike that. Graded initiation, compartmentalize a knowledge, recruitment among educated and influential people, and it sought to spread Enlightenment ideas while limiting the influence of religious authority. The Illuminati did not invent Freemasonry, and Freemasonry was not identical to the Illuminati, but the organizations overlapped. Weishaupt and his allies recognized that the Masonic lodges already offered something valuable: networks of educated men, private meeting places, established rituals, a culture of discretion. The Illuminati adopted and attempted to recruit through Masonic circles and use existing traditional structures as pathways through expansion. The part is historical. The next part is where history begins turning into mythology. Bavarian authorities suppressed the Illuminati in the 1780s. Documents were seized, the organization was banned, but rumors of its survival spread. Soon the Illuminati was blamed for revolutions, the collapse of monarchies, religious decline, banking systems, wars, political movements, modern entertainment, and eventually almost every large event that seemed too coordinated or too frightening to be accidental. Why did the story grow so large? Well, because it provided a human face for an invisible power. Modern societies are governed by systems so complex that no single person understands all of them. Banks, markets, governments, intelligence agencies, corporations, algorithms, international institutions. Influence moves through relationships that ordinary people rarely see. The idea of one hidden organization simplifies the confusion. Instead of thousands of overlapping incentives, institutions, and networks, there is one room, one table, one plan. That explanation is emotionally satisfying, but emotional satisfaction is not evidence. The historical Illuminati recruited through Masonic networks. That is documented. The claim that permanently captured all of the Freemasonry and still directs world events through a continuous central command has not been demonstrated. But notice what happened. A real organization, using real secrecy, interacting with real Freemasons, became the seed of an unlimited theory. A small confirmed connection explained until it explained everything. And a theory that explains everything can become impossible to test. If documents exist, they prove the conspiracy. If documents don't exist, their absence proves the cover-up. If members deny it, they are protecting the secret. If members admit historical overlap, the admission proves infiltration. At that point, every possible outcome supports the same conclusion. That is not investigation. That is a belief system. But then came Albert Pike, and the story became even darker. Albert Pike, Lucifer, and the Perfect Hoax. Albert Pike was an 19th century American lawyer, writer, and enormously influential figure in the Scottish Rite. His most famous work, Morals and Dogma, is dense, philosophical, symbolic, filled with references to religion, mythology, morality, ancient traditions, light, darkness, good, evil, and the search for truth. Read without context. Some passages sound mysterious, others sound occult. And because Pike became associated with high-degree Freemasonry, conspiracy writers transformed him into something larger than a scholar or a ritual reformer. He became the supposed architect of hidden religion. Quotes appeared claiming that Pike had revealed the true Luciferian beliefs of the highest Masons. A famous alleged letter claimed that he predicted 3 world wars. Another story claimed that only ordinary Masons believed in morality, while the highest initiates secretly worship Lucifer. There is a major problem. The most sensational evidence is unreliable. The alleged 3 World Wars letter was never been authenticated. Though a credible original document is language contains ideas associated with later historical periods. And many Luciferian claims were amplified by one of the most successful religious hoaxes of the 19th century, the Taxil hoax. Leo Taxil was a French writer with a talent for provocation. He claimed to expose a hidden satanic system inside the Freemasonry. He described secret Palladian orders, Luciferian ceremonies, demonic manifestations, high-level initiates serving supernatural powers. He introduced the public to an alleged insider named Diana Vaughn. The stories were theatrical, detailed, terrifying, and false. In 1897, Taxil publicly confessed that the entire performance had been hoax. But the confession did not kill the story. The images survived. The quotations survived. The invented organization survived. And more than a century later, pieces of the hoax continued to circulate as evidence. Why? Because corrections rarely travel as far as accusations. A careful historical explanation requires time. A shocking image requires seconds. The hoax also confirms something people already feared. The respectable men could gather publicly for charity while secretly practicing evil. Taxil did not create the fear. He monetized it. And this reveals another layer of Freemason mystery. He monetized it. And this reveals another layer of the Freemason mystery. Sometimes the most powerful secret is not hidden by the organization. It is invented by the enemies. The 33rd degree. Few numbers create more suspicion than 33. The 33rd degree is real. It belongs to the Scottish Rite, but its meaning is widely misunderstood. Foundational craft Freemasonry contains 3 degrees. Entered Apprentice, fellow craft, Master Mason. A Master Mason may then choose to join additional Masonic bodies. The Scottish Rite offers a system of additional degrees, commonly numbered from the 4th through the 32nd. The 33rd is generally associated with distinguished service, honor of leadership within the Scottish Rite. It does not transform a person into a ruler of every Mason. It does not place him above every Grand Master. And it does not prove access to a world government. The confusion comes from treating degree numbers like military rank. 33 appears higher than 3. Therefore, people assume the 33rd degree commands the 3rd. But these systems do not operate as one simple ladder. A Grand Master governing craft lodges in a jurisdiction may exercise more direct organizational authority than a 33rd degree Mason who holds no governing office. The Scottish Rite itself developed through complicated historical stages. It did not descend from formed from ancient Scotland. Its degrees developed through European, French, Caribbean, and American influences. Even some documents used to support its traditional authority have disputed origins. This does not make the Scottish Rite fake. Institutions can be real even when their origin stories are partly legendary. Nations do this. Religions do this. Universities do this. Families do this. We tell stories about where we came from because origin stories explain who we believe we are. But if the 33rd degree is not the command center, why does the belief remain so powerful? Because hidden hierarchy is one of the humanity's oldest fears. We are willing to believe that the person in front of us is not really in charge. That behind every visible leader is another leader. Behind that leader, another. And somewhere at the top, someone knows the whole plan. But what if there is no top? What if power is distributed? What if influence moves through networks instead of commands? That possibility may be less cinematic, but it may be closer to how the world actually works. The Republic and the Cornerstone. On September 18, 1793, President George Washington participated in laying of the cornerstone of the United States Capitol. It was a Masonic ceremony. A procession moved through the young federal city. Corn, wine, and oil were used in the dedication. Washington wore Masonic regalia. This event is not hidden. It is part of the official historical record, and it raises an obvious question. How much influence did Freemasonry have on the founding of the United States? The answer is significant, but not unlimited. Washington was a Mason. Other important revolutionary and early American figures had Masonic connections. Freemasonry's language of moral self-government, ordered liberty, religious tolerance, architecture, and brotherhood fit naturally within the intellectual world of the Enlightenment. The lodge offered men from different religious and social backgrounds a controlled environment in which they could meet. It encouraged the idea a person could be judged by character rather than inherited rank. That idea mattered in an age still dominated by aristocracy. But not every founder was a Mason. The founders did not act as one Masonic bloc. They disagreed, competed, fought over policy, and pursued confliction visions of a country. Freemasonry influenced the culture surrounding the foundation. That is not the same as secretly controlling the founding. Still, the public ceremony at the Capitol tells us something important. Every American Mason did not always hide their membership. They displayed it. They used it as a language of civic virtue. So how did that visible influence later become evidence of a hidden control? Part of the answer can be seen on the dollar bill. An unfinished pyramid, an eye above it, Latin words, 13 levels, symbols that appear ancient, mysterious, and intentionally coded. The Eye of Providence later appeared in Masonic contexts, but it existed in religious art before becoming strongly associated with Freemasonry. The Great Seal's imaginary was not created as a confirmed Masonic command code. The overlap is symbolic, not conclusive. The same problem appears in maps of Washington, D.C. Draw the right lines between the right streets. Ignore the roads that do not fit. Select the right endpoints, and a compass appears. Or a pentagram, or an owl, or almost any shape the investigator expects to find. This is a form of pattern selection. The city contains real monumental geometry, real Masonic history, real classical symbolism, but those facts do not automatically prove that the street plan was constructed as an occult cultural mechanism. The danger is that unsupported theory can distract from documented history. We do not need to invent Masonic influence on the Capitol. It happened in public. And that creates a better question. Not whether symbols were secretly placed inside the American history, but why those symbols appeared so strongly to the people building a new republic. The man who threatened to reveal everything. In 1826, a man named William Morgan prepared to publish Masonic secrets. What happened next transformed American politics. Morgan faced legal pressure. He was arrested, then removed from jail, and then disappeared. He was never conclusively seen again. Masons were implicated in his abduction. Public suspicion exploded. Many Americans became convinced that Masonic loyalties had interfered with police, courts, witnesses, and the investigation. The outrage helped produce the anti-Masonic movement, and eventually America's first significant third political party, the Anti-Masonic Party. Morgan's final fate remained unsolved. He was murdered. He was secretly released. Did he escape under a new identity? Did the men who removed him intend to frighten him but lose control of the situation? The evidence does not permit absolute certainty, but the case established something that would haunt Freemasonry for generations. The fear that the private obligation between members could become stronger than the public obligation to justice. This is the most important political concern surrounding secret fraternities. Not demons, not magic words, not hidden energy inside the symbol. Divided loyalty. Imagine a police officer investigating another Mason. A judge hearing a case involving a lodge brother. A contractor bidding for work controlled by a member. A prosecutor deciding whether to pursue charges. A journalist deciding whether to publish. None of these relationships automatically prove corruption. People belong to churches, clubs, universities, fraternities, military units, and professional organizations. Relationships exist everywhere. But secrecy changes the public's ability to evaluate those relationships. A conflict that is visible can be questioned. A conflict that is invisible may never be examined. The Morgan affair turned this concept into a national political force. But was it merely a product of the 19th century? Or would the same issue return when the conspiracy was real? Italy. Police searching the home of a financier named Lucio Gielelli. Police searching the home of a financier named Lucio Gielelli discovered a list. Names on that list reached into some of the most powerful institutions in the country. Military leaders, intelligence officials, politicians, industrialists, financiers, journalists, members of the secretly establishment. They were connected to propaganda due P2, a clandestine lodge led by Gielelli. P2 became associated with covert political influence, banking scandal, intelligence networks, and plans to restructure Italian society. Its exposure contributed to the collapse of an Italian government. A parliamentary investigation examined that network. This was not a theory built from some symbols on currency. It was not a line drawn across a city map. It was not a quotation copied from an unauthenticated letter. There were names, documents, institutional positions, financial relationships, a structure. P2 proves something important. A lodge-like network can become a vehicle for covert political power. Members positioned across different institutions can coordinate or at least provide access, protection, and information without creating one public organization that appears to control them. But P2 also demonstrates why precision matters. Mainstream Masonic authorities treated P2 as an irregular or expelled. Defenders argued that its conduct cannot be attributed to Freemasonry as a whole. That is fair. One criminal network does not prove that every lodge is criminal, but expulsion does not erase the mechanism. Gileli used a Masonic framework, a culture of recognition, private membership, structured loyalty, and access to influential people. P2 does not prove the largest theory, it proves a smaller one. A smaller conspiracies are often more dangerous because they are possible. They do not require thousands of people to follow one global plan. They require a limited number of strategically positioned people, a shared interest, private communication, and enough institutional trust to protect the network. This is how many real conspiracies operate. Not as pyramids with one all-seeing ruler at the top, but as webs, nodes, relationships, favors, information, people who know whom to call. The invisible architecture of trust. Suppose two men meet inside a lodge. They participate in the same ceremonies. They make similar obligations. They share meals. They recognize one another as brothers. Years later, one becomes a judge, the other becomes a police commander. The third becomes a contractor. The fourth enters politics. A fifth controls a bank. Do they need to receive secret orders to influence one another? No. Human networks rarely require explicit commands. Trust itself creates opportunity. A member may say, I know someone reliable. He is one of us. I can make an introduction. Let me call someone. Most of the time, this may be harmless. Mentorship, friendship, clarity, professional support. The same things occur inside universities, churches, military commands, and business associations. But under certain conditions, the same network can produce favoritism, access denied to outsiders, undisclosed conflicts, protection from discipline, preferential contracts, information moving through unofficial channels. The question is not whether Masons help one another. Human beings help members of their own groups. The question is whether private loyalty ever overrules public duty. This is difficult to prove. Formal meetings minutes do not record every private conversation. A favor may be described as a favor. A person may sincerely believe that he is recommending the best candidate. The network may influence behavior without any member consciously believing that he is participating in corruption. This is where psychology becomes more important than conspiracy. People trust those who resemble them, those who share experiences, those who signal membership in the same moral community. Sociologists call the social capital. Networks create value because they reduce uncertainty. But every network also creates boundaries. Insiders receive trust faster. Outsiders must prove themselves, and when the network is private, outsiders may not even know the boundary exists. That may be the deeper surviving secret of Freemasonry. Not a sentence spoken during a ritual, but the cumulative. Strike that. Not a sentence spoken during a ritual, but the cumulative effect of thousands of relationships that cannot easily be seen from the outside. The religious question. Freemasonry says it is not a religion. It does not ordinarily claim to provide a unique path to salvation. It has no single prophet, no universal Masonic theology, no central priesthood commanding every lodge. Yet Masonic ceremonies use sacred books, prayer, altars, obligations, moral teachings, symbolic death, ideas about immortality, and a title for deity, the grand architect of the universe. For supporters, that title creates religious tolerance. A Christian can understand the grand architect through Christianity, a Jewish member through Judaism, a Muslim through Islam. The lodge avoids deciding which theology is correct. For critics, that is precisely the problem. If contradictory religion can stand together beneath one natural title, does that imply that their differences do not ultimately matter? The Catholic Church has maintained that Masonic principles are incompatible with Catholic doctrine. Masonic principles are incompatible with Catholic doctrine. Its objection is not simply that Masons meet privately. The Catholic Church has maintained that Masonic principles are incompatible with Catholic doctrine. Its objection is not simply that Masons meet privately. Its concerns is religious relativism, the nature of truth, the authority of revelation, and whether a system of moral development can be separated from specific understanding of God. This is more complicated than saying the church knows Masons worship Lucifer. The official conflict is theological. It concerns competing ideas about truth. Freemasonry attempts to create brotherhood without requiring theological agreement. The Catholic position argues that some theological differences cannot be reduced to private interpretation. This creates a profound philosophical question. Can people unite around a shape of moral symbols without weakening the truth claims of their religions? Freemasonry says yes. Its religious critics say that the method itself changes what the faith means. Neither side needs demons for the disagreement to be serious. Why the mystery survived. By now, most major Masonic symbols have been explained. Most historical ceremonies have been published somewhere. Recognition methods have been repeatedly exposed. Bookshelves are filled with Masonic histories, defenses, attacks, and ritual interpretations. So why does the mystery survive? Because facts alone do not resolve distrust. Mystery survives, then several conditions exist at once. First, real secrecy. Even limited secrecy invites speculation about what else may be concealed. Second, influential members. A private organization attracts more attention when its membership includes presidents, judges, generals, financiers, and police officers. Third, symbolic complexity. An ordinary club logo does not produce centuries of analysis. An eye, a temple, a lost word, and a ritual death do. Fourth, incomplete records. Historical gaps become open spaces where imagination can operate. Fifth, real scandals. Morgan, P2, institutional conflicts. These cases prevent the public from dismissing every concern. Sixth, hoaxes. False claims mixed with genuine documents until separating them require more work than most people have time to perform. And finally, human psychology. We are pattern-seeking animals. We assume that large events require large planners. We struggle to accept that history can emerge from millions of people making disconnected decisions. A hidden order feels more understandable than chaos, but opposite psychological error is also possible. People can become so afraid of conspiracy thinking that they refuse to recognize real coordination when evidence appears. That is why the correct position is neither automatic belief nor automatic dismissal. It is disciplined curiosity. What is the claim? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Is the source authentic? Can the conclusion be tested? Are we confusing membership with action? Are we confusing symbolism with command? Are we confusing local scandal with a global structure? And most importantly, what evidence would change our minds? Return for a moment to the room where we began. The closed door, the square, the compass, the pillars, the unfinished stone, the open sacred text. At the beginning of this episode, those symbols appeared to hold the mystery. The handshake seemed important. The password the ceremony seemed important. And they are. But after following the evidence, the question looks different. The rituals were exposed generations ago. Books have described them. Former members have published them. Historians have examined them. Masonic organizations themselves now explain much of their history, structure, symbolism, and purpose in the public. Yet, the mystery survived. Perhaps that is because the deepest question was never what happened during the meeting. It was what happened after the meeting ended. When members returned to courtrooms, police departments, businesses, banks, military commands, universities, newsrooms, and governments, most Freemasons probably returned to ordinary lives. They supported charities, maintained friendships, helped their communities, preserved traditions handed down through generations. The available evidence does not support the claim that every Freemason participates in a worldwide conspiracy. It does not prove that the 33rd degree secretly governs the planet. It does not establish that mainstream Freemasonry worships Lucifer. It does not demonstrate that every pyramid, eye, street pattern, political appointment, or historical event contains a hidden Masonic command. But history also tells us not to dismiss every concern. The William Morgan affair showed how fear or divided loyalty could become a national political crisis. The Bavarian Illuminati really did recruit through Masonic networks. The P2 scandal demonstrated that clandestine lodge could connect powerful people across intelligence, finance, politics, the military, and the media. In modern debates, without membership disclosed, showed that boundaries between private associations and public responsibility remains unsettled. That does not justify accusing people without evidence. It justifies asking better questions. What a private relationship disclosed? Did it affect an official decision? Were normal procedures bypassed? Was someone protected? Did someone receive access unavailable to outsiders? Is there evidence of an action or only an evidence of membership? Those distinctions matter because suspicion without evidence can destroy innocent people. But secrecy without accountability can damage entire institutions. So perhaps the real lesson of Freemasonry is not simply about Freemasonry. It is about every private network that operates alongside public power. professional or associations, political organizations, intelligence communities, universities, corporations, religious institutions, fraternities, private clubs, and the countless of informal relationships that help determine who receives trust, access, opportunity, protection, and influence. Every society depends upon trust, but trust becomes dangerous when it is used to avoid accountability. Privacy is a legitimate human right, but privacy becomes concealment when public duties are compromised behind closed doors. Brotherhood can produce charity, mentorship service, and belonging, but the same instinct that encourages people to protect one another can become destructive when loyalty to the group becomes stronger than loyalty to the truth. That is the line worth investigating. Not because every lodge crosses it, but because history proves that some private networks have. The rituals were exposed. The symbols were decoded. The supposed supernatural secretly large dissolved under examination. What remains harder to see is the architecture of relationships. Who knows whom? Who trusts whom? Who receives the telephone call? Who gets the introduction? Who is believed immediately? Who is protected? And who remains outside the room? Those questions cannot be answered through symbols alone. They require documents, membership records, financial trails, official decision disclosures, witnesses, patterns, and evidence. That is where responsible investigation begins, not with the conclusion that anyone is guilty, and not with the assumption that nothing could be wrong. With the evidence. If today's episode made you think, don't stop here. Read the research, study history, examine original documents, listen to current Freemasons, listen to former members, listen to historians, listen to religious critics, listen to investigators who have examined real institutional corruption, and listen to people who disagree with you. Question the sensational claims. Question the official explanations. Question the symbols. Question the coincidences. Question the headlines. Question the experts. Question your assumptions. And question mine. Because Rabbit Holes Deep Dives is not about handing you conclusion. It's about following the evidence, even when the evidence leads somewhere uncomfortable. What evidence would convince you that a private organization had improperly influenced a public institution? Should judges, prosecutors, police officers, and elected officials disclose membership that could create a conflict of interest? Where should society draw the line between freedom and association and public accountability? And which part of this story deserves its own investigation? The Knights Templar, the Bavarian Illuminati, Albert Pike, the disappearance of William Morgan, the P2 Lodge, or psychology of secret societies themselves? Share the episode with someone willing to examine the evidence. Tell me which rabbit hole we should investigate next. Because every answer opens another question, and every question leads us farther down the rabbit hole. My name is Leroy Nellis, and this is Resilience Radio. Godspeed, stand for the Constitution, and never surrender your ability to think for yourself. God bless, and good night. Hey everybody, I wanted to sit down with you today and talk about something we've been working on behind the scenes for quite a while now. First, I want to thank you. Whether you've been here from the beginning or you just found the channel recently, I want you to know that I genuinely appreciate every single one of you. Every comment, every conversation, every suggestion, every word of encouragement has helped shape what Resilience Radio is becoming. This isn't just my channel anymore. It's about a community. And because of that, I wanted you to hear these changes directly from me. Over the last several months, we've been doing something a little unusual. We've been studying our analytics almost obsessively. Not just YouTube analytics, but the analytics coming from Naomi, the AI production system we've been building from the ground up. We've been asking questions like, what videos do people come here for? What keeps people watching? What topics naturally fit together? And what happens when we mix very little types of content on the same channel? After looking at thousands of data points, we came to one conclusion. It's time to let each series become a very best version of itself. So today, I'm excited to announce that Rabbit Holes is becoming its own dedicated YouTube channel. Rabbit Holes deserves its own home. It's where we dive into mysteries, history, unsolved questions, and rabbit holes. Strange events, forgotten stories, and all of those fascinating topics that make us lose track of time. By giving Rabbit Holes its own channel, YouTube can better understand who those videos are for. Our AI can learn from much cleaner data, and we can build something truly special for people who love those deep dives. Resilience Radio will continue doing what has always meant to do, help people understand themselves through psychology,
You pushed me down, thought I'd stay on the ground, counting me out like the numbers didn't matter. But pressure builds diamonds in the dark, and I've been sharpening my edge in the chatter. Every scar turned into strategy, every setback fueled my clarity. I took the hits, learned the game, turned my losses into flame. Now I'm coming back strong, and you'll remember my name. I'm rising through the fire.